History is filled with objects that defy explanation. This video explores 20 out-of-place artifacts, each one a tangible piece of evidence that challenges our conventional timeline. By the end, you will see the past not as a settled story, but as a dynamic puzzle with missing pieces. How did an ancient Greek device predict eclipses with clockwork precision 1,000 years too early? Why does a medieval world map appear to show an ice-free Antarctica? These are not just curiosities, they are profound mysteries. What does it mean for our understanding of progress if advanced knowledge can appear, vanish, and be forgotten? The true power of these objects lies not in their age or material, but in their profound incongruity. To be considered truly out of place, an artifact must be discovered in a setting that defies logical explanation based on our current historical framework. It is the context that creates the mystery. Imagine finding a sophisticated mechanical device sealed within a 2,000-year-old shipwreck, or a modern-style hammer encased in stone that formed millions of years ago. These are not merely old objects, they are chronological puzzles. The artifact itself seems to whisper a story that directly contradicts the established narrative of human technological and cultural progress. It suggests a possibility, however faint, that a piece of knowledge was known, then lost, and then independently rediscovered centuries or even millennia later. This concept forces us to confront the incomplete nature of our historical record. We build timelines from the fragments we have found, but what if some of the most important fragments are still buried, or worse, have crumbled to dust without a trace? The out-of-place artifact stands as a stubborn reminder that our past may be far more complex, interconnected, and surprising than any textbook could ever comfortably contain. It invites us to question not just the object, but the very foundations of how we reconstruct history from silent stones and buried metals. This inherent conflict of interpretation is where the story of these objects truly ignites. Every out-of-place artifact sits at the center of a heated intellectual battleground, a clash between two fundamentally different ways of seeing the past. On one hand, we have the meticulous, often skeptical world of mainstream archaeology and history. When confronted with an object that seems impossibly advanced or out of time, the first instinct of a professional researcher is not to rewrite history, but to scrutinize the evidence. They apply a principle known as Occam's razor, which suggests the simplest explanation, the one requiring the fewest new assumptions, is often the correct one. Could the artifact have been misinterpreted? Could its dating be flawed due to contamination of the site? Is there a possibility, however uncomfortable, of a modern forgery designed to deceive? This approach is not about dismissing mystery, but about upholding the rigorous standards of the scientific method, ensuring that every claim is supported by reproducible evidence and peer-reviewed analysis. It is a slow, careful process of elimination. On the other side of this divide, we find the vibrant and speculative realm of alternative history. Here, researchers and enthusiasts look at the same puzzling object and see not an anomaly to be explained away, but a key to a forgotten truth. They argue that mainstream science is sometimes too rigid, too invested in the established timeline to accept evidence that could overturn it. To them, these artifacts are potential proof of advanced prehistoric civilizations, like the legendary Atlantis or Mu, whose technological achievements were lost to some great cataclysm. Others see hints of ancient global exploration long before the accepted dates, suggesting interconnected cultures across oceans. Some interpretations venture even further, proposing that such advanced knowledge could only have come from outside our world. This perspective is driven by a sense that the official story is incomplete, that there are gaps too large to be filled by the slow march of progress as we understand it. The tension between these two viewpoints is not merely academic. It shapes the entire journey of an out-of-place artifact from discovery to public awareness. A mainstream explanation might relegate a fascinating object to a footnote about medieval craftsmanship or a curious geological formation. An alternative interpretation can launch it into international fame, surrounded by theories that capture the public imagination. Often, the truth, or at least the most reasonable conclusion, lies in a nuanced middle ground that is hard to reach amidst the noise. Some artifacts, after intense study, are indeed revealed to be misdated or misunderstood, their mystery solved. Others, however, withstand every conventional challenge. Their composition matches their alleged age, their context appears secure, and yet their very existence feels anachronistic. These are the stubborn ones, the unresolved cases that continue to whisper from the edges of our historical maps. Understanding this ongoing debate is essential because it frames every discovery we are about to explore. We are not just looking at old objects, we are witnessing a live conversation about the nature of evidence, the limits of knowledge, and the thrilling possibility that our past holds secrets we have only begun to glimpse. The deep blue waters off the coast of a small Greek island hold a secret that rewrote our understanding of ancient genius. In the year 1901, sponge divers exploring a Roman-era shipwreck near Antikythera brought up a lump of corroded bronze and wood encrusted with 2 millennia of sea life. To the archaeologists of the time, it was an interesting but unremarkable find, perhaps a piece of a statue or a simple navigational aid. They catalogued it and moved on, completely unaware that within that calcified mass lay the most technologically sophisticated object from the ancient world ever discovered. For decades, it sat in a museum storage room, its true nature hidden. Then, in the 1950s, a researcher taking a closer look noticed something astonishing, faint traces of gear teeth on the fractured edges. This was not a statue, it was a machine. The journey to unravel its purpose began, a journey that would require advanced imaging technology not invented for another half-century. When researchers finally peered inside using high-resolution X-rays and three-dimensional mapping, they were met with a sight that defied belief. The Antikythera Mechanism, as it came to be known, was an astronomical computer of breathtaking complexity. It contained over 30 interlocking bronze gears, precisely machined and arranged within a wooden frame about the size of a large shoebox. By turning a hand crank on the side, the entire system would come to life, moving dials and pointers across several faces inscribed with intricate Greek text. This was not a simple calendar. It could predict the positions of the sun and moon, the phases of our lunar companion, and even the timing of solar and lunar eclipses years in advance. It modeled the irregular orbit of the moon, a subtle motion that requires a sophisticated differential gear, a piece of engineering not thought to have been invented until the 16th century. Here was a device that displayed a mechanical understanding of the cosmos that should not have existed for another 1,500 years. Its very existence poses a profound and unsettling question. We think of technological progress as a steady, upward climb, but the Antikythera Mechanism stands as a stark monument to a different possibility, that of a peak followed by a valley of forgetting. It suggests that a school of brilliant Greek engineers, perhaps in the tradition of Archimedes, achieved a level of mechanical craftsmanship and astronomical theory that was not passed down. The knowledge required to build such a device, the precise mathematics, the metallurgy, the intricate design, all of it seems to have vanished with the civilization that created it. The ship carrying it may have been destined for Rome, a trophy for a wealthy patron, but it sank, taking this pinnacle of ancient technology to the seabed. For centuries, the intricate clockwork of Europe would be far simpler. The mechanism forces us to confront a humbling reality. Our historical timeline is built upon the artifacts that survive, the writings that were copied and preserved. The Antikythera Mechanism is a surviving fragment of a lost chapter, a single page from a vast manual of ancient high technology that was burned, lost, or simply never written down. It whispers that the ancient world may have been capable of feats we are only now rediscovering, and that the path of human ingenuity is not a straight line, but a story with forgotten turns and abandoned workshops whose secrets still lie buried, waiting to challenge everything we think we know. The silent, unassuming clay jar resting in a museum case holds a potential that seems to defy its age. Discovered in the 1930s near Baghdad, this simple artifact from the Parthian or Sasanian era, dating from around 250 years before the Common Era to 650 years after, appears at first glance to be nothing more than an ancient storage vessel. Yet its construction tells a different, more electrifying story. Inside the clay jar, archaeologists found a carefully placed copper cylinder, and within that, an iron rod suspended by an asphalt stopper. This specific arrangement of materials is not random, it is functional. When the jar is filled with an acidic liquid, something commonly available in the ancient world like vinegar or fermented grape juice, a chemical reaction occurs between the two different metals and the electrolyte. This reaction generates a small but measurable electric voltage, turning the entire assembly into a basic galvanic cell, a primitive battery. The implications of this are staggering. If this was its intended use, it means that someone, nearly 2,000 years before Alessandro Volta's celebrated invention in the year 1800, was experimenting with and potentially harnessing electrical current. But what purpose could such a faint trickle of electricity have served in antiquity? This is where the mystery deepens, moving from a question of what it is to the far more intriguing question of why it existed. One compelling theory points to the ancient art of gilding. Artisans of the time were masters of applying thin layers of gold or silver to objects, a process we now know can be achieved through electroplating, which uses an electrical current to bond metal ions to a surface. Could the Baghdad battery have been used in a small-scale, experimental form of this practice? A modern replica, using a reconstruction of the jar and a weak acid like vinegar, can indeed produce enough current to electroplate a small object with a fine layer of gold over several hours. It is a quiet, practical application, a tool for a craftsman seeking a new method. Other theories are more speculative. Some researchers have suggested a medicinal use, perhaps a form of early electrotherapy where the mild tingling sensation was believed to have healing properties for pain. Others propose a religious or ceremonial function, where the mysterious and invisible power generated could have been used to create a sense of awe during rituals, making a metal idol seem to vibrate or produce a strange sensation when touched. The asphalt stopper itself is a clue, as it would have served to insulate the two metals and prevent the charge from dissipating, suggesting an understanding of the need to contain and direct this force. The true enigma of the Baghdad battery is not necessarily whether it worked. Modern experiments confirm it can produce about 1 volt of electricity, but whether its creators understood the principles behind what they had built. Were they consciously exploring the phenomenon of electricity, or was this a happy accident born from combining common materials? The artifact sits at a frustrating crossroads. No wires have been found with it, no ancient diagrams explain its use, and no contemporary texts from the region describe such a device. This absence of context is what allows the debate to flourish. Mainstream archaeology often cautions that it could have been a storage vessel for sacred scrolls, with the iron and copper rods merely serving as protective containers, the electrical property being a coincidental side effect of the materials chosen. Yet the elegance of its design, so perfectly mirroring a basic electrochemical cell, makes the coincidence seem remarkably profound. It stands as a testament to a possibility that the spark of discovery can ignite in any era. Perhaps a curious mind in a workshop 2 millennia ago observed a strange tingle when certain metals touched certain liquids, and through experimentation, crafted this vessel to amplify and capture that unseen energy. Even if its use was limited, symbolic, or ultimately abandoned, the Baghdad battery challenges the linear narrative of invention. It suggests that the path to our electrified world might have had a much earlier and far quieter beginning in the dusty plains of Mesopotamia, a single, faint glow in the long night before the light bulb. From the spark of ancient electricity, we find a silent wooden form that seems to yearn for the sky. Nestled among the treasures of a tomb in Saqqara, Egypt, is a small artifact carved from sycamore wood, dated to around 200 years before the Common Era. At a glance, it is a simple bird figurine, an object one might expect to find in a burial meant to accompany an individual into the afterlife. But a closer look reveals a design that feels startlingly out of time. The so-called Saqqara bird does not look like any bird found in nature. Its wings are perfectly straight, rigid, and aerodynamically shaped, with a cross-section that resembles the wing of a modern aircraft. Instead of legs, it has a smooth, rounded body, and at its rear a distinct vertical tail fin, a feature no bird possesses. This tail fin is not decorative, it is a critical component for stability in flight. The overall silhouette is unmistakable. It looks less like a creature of feathers and more like a model glider. This peculiar design has captivated not just archaeologists but aeronautical engineers. When they examine replicas, they apply the same principles used to test aircraft models. They note that the wings are angled in a way that generates lift, the force that allows an airplane to rise into the air. The placement and shape of the tailfin would help keep the object stable and prevent it from spinning out of control if it were launched. In wind tunnel tests, some replicas have demonstrated remarkably stable gliding capabilities when a small horizontal stabilizer, perhaps lost over the centuries, is added to the tail. This performance is not an accident of carving. It appears to be a design embedded with an intuitive, or perhaps even a studied, understanding of basic flight dynamics. So what exactly is this object? The mainstream and most accepted explanation is that it is a ceremonial object, possibly a child's toy, or a stylized representation of a falcon, a bird sacred to the god Horus. It could have been a weather vane, or simply an artistic expression where the form took precedence over strict realism. After all, the ancient Egyptians were master craftsmen who stylized many things in their art. Yet, the specificity of its aerodynamic features continues to whisper a more provocative idea. Could it be a scale model of a larger, working glider? The concept is not as far-fetched as it might seem. The Egyptians were brilliant observers of nature and adept engineers, constructing monumental buildings that have stood for millennia. They understood the principles of leverage, balance, and sail power on the Nile. Is it impossible that a curious mind, watching birds soar on thermal currents, might have sought to replicate that motion? They had access to lightweight materials like papyrus and wood. Perhaps a forgotten inventor crafted a large, human-carrying glider that launched from a high dune, achieving a brief, silent flight that was witnessed by only a few and never recorded in hieroglyphs. The Saqqara bird fuels this line of speculation because it embodies a principle, the essence of a wing designed for lift rather than flapping. It represents a conceptual leap from observing flight to engineering it. This artifact does not demand that we believe the Egyptians had an air force, but it gently challenges the assumption that the fundamental ideas of aerodynamics were entirely beyond their imagination. It stands as a physical question mark. Was it merely a toy that, by happy coincidence, mirrors principles we would not formally understand for another 2,000 years? Or is it a tangible clue, a model left behind as a testament to a line of experimental thought that was pursued, then abandoned, leaving only this small wooden key to a door we cannot fully open. In a civilization that reached for the heavens with their pyramids, perhaps someone also dreamed of touching the sky in a more literal way, leaving behind this elegant, enigmatic shape to glide through the centuries and land squarely in the center of our modern wonder. A small, hardened lump of earth conceals a secret from an impossible age. In the spring of 1961, 3 friends searching for interesting stones in California's Coso Mountains discovered a peculiar geode, a rounded nodule that typically contains a crystal-lined cavity inside. Expecting the glitter of quartz or agate, they instead cracked it open to reveal something that stopped them cold. Embedded within the solid rock was an object that looked unmistakably mechanical. At its center was a ceramic cylinder, a white insulator surrounding a rusted metal rod. Encircling this was what appeared to be a hexagonal metal sheath, now corroded. The entire assembly bore a stunning, almost unsettling resemblance to a modern spark plug. This was not an ancient carving or a weathered natural formation. It was an artifact of precise industrial design. But the context made no sense. The geode was found in a layer geological surveys suggested was over 500,000 years old, a time when early humans were just beginning to use simple stone tools. The idea of a spark plug from an era when saber-toothed cats and mammoths roamed North America was, of course, scientifically untenable. This immediate and profound contradiction is what launched the Coso artifact into legendary status. The initial analysis seemed to support the incredible. An X-ray of the object, still encased in its rocky shell, revealed further mechanical details, including a tiny metal pin or spring at one end, adding to its manufactured appearance. A geologist who examined it reportedly stated the concretion around the object had taken a minimum of 500,000 years to form. For proponents of alternative history, this was a smoking gun, tangible proof that an advanced civilization, perhaps even visitors from beyond our world, had been present on Earth in the deep past. The object was seen as a literal fossil of technology, a machine part that had somehow become entombed in stone as the mountains formed around it. It suggested a narrative where history is not a slow climb, but a cycle of rise and catastrophic fall, where evidence of high technology is buried not just in sand but in geological epochs. However, mysteries of this magnitude inevitably attract intense scrutiny, and the Coso artifact story grew more complex under the lens of skepticism. The primary challenge came from researchers who sought a more conventional explanation. They noted that the object bore a striking similarity to champion spark plugs manufactured in the 1920s, a common component in early automobiles and small engines. The ceramic insulator, the hexagonal nut, the central electrode, all matched period designs. The proposed modern explanation is one of rapid mineral accretion, not ancient fossilization. If a spark plug from the 1920s was discarded in the mineral-rich soil of the Coso Mountains, particularly near a source of calcium carbonate like an old hot spring, it could have become the nucleus for a hard mineral concretion. In the right conditions, such concretions can form surprisingly fast within decades, not millennia. The object would essentially be a modern piece of trash that nature had quickly camouflaged in a shell of rock, fooling the discoverers into thinking it was a geode. This explanation is favored by mainstream science as it requires no rewriting of geology or human history. Yet, the debate is far from settled. Those who defend the artifact's antiquity point to the original geological assessment and the specific context of its discovery. They argue that the conditions needed for such rapid concretion are specific, and that the initial X-ray analysis showed details not entirely consistent with a 1920s spark plug. The truth is, the original artifact vanished from public view decades ago, making modern, definitive testing impossible. This absence is perhaps the most frustrating part of the enigma. Without the physical evidence to subject to contemporary dating techniques, The Coso artifact exists now primarily as a story, a set of black and white photographs and an X-ray image. It lives on as a perfect symbol of the interpretative divide. Is it a profound anomaly that challenges our deepest timelines, or is it a fascinating lesson in how nature can mimic industry and how our desire to find the extraordinary can shape what we believe we see? It stands as a cautionary tale about the importance of preserving controversial evidence, but also as an enduring emblem of possibility. For some, it will always be a spark plug from a time before fire was tamed, a silent, rusted key to a door in the deepest walls of time. A hammer should not be a geological mystery. In 1936, on a walk near the town of London, Texas, a couple made a discovery that would become one of the most visually striking out-of-place artifacts. They found a curious rock with a piece of wood and what appeared to be an iron tool head protruding from it. After cracking the stone open, they revealed a complete hammer, its head firmly embedded within a solid concretion of Cretaceous limestone, a rock layer formed from sediments deposited when dinosaurs walked the Earth over 100 million years ago. This was not a hammer simply lying on the ground. It was imprisoned inside the stone itself. The artifact presents a puzzle in two distinct parts, each seemingly at odds with conventional history. First, there is the hammerhead. Analysis has shown it is made of a remarkably pure form of iron, with only trace amounts of impurities, a composition that does not match typical modern steel alloys. The craftsmanship is also notable, showing a symmetrical, well-formed design that suggests skilled metalworking. Second, and perhaps more baffling, is the handle. The wooden shaft is partially transformed into coal, a process known as coalification that requires immense pressure, heat, and most critically, vast stretches of geological time. This is not a handle that simply rotted or petrified. It underwent a specific mineral transformation that, according to standard geology, should have taken millions of years to occur. The combined evidence of the ancient rock and the coalified wood creates an almost unthinkable narrative that a human-made tool existed in an era long before the first proto-humans are believed to have evolved. Mainstream science offers a counter-explanation, one that seeks to untangle this chronological knot. Geologists argue that the hammer is a more recent object, likely from the 19th century, that fell or was discarded into a crevice within the softer, decomposing limestone. Over time, dissolved minerals in groundwater percolated around the tool, cementing it into a new, hard concretion. This process, while requiring specific chemical conditions, can happen relatively quickly on a geological scale within centuries or even decades. The coalification of the wood, they suggest, could be a different type of mineral replacement that mimics the appearance of true coal. Or perhaps the wood itself was already ancient, fossilized material that a more recent craftsman used for a handle. This view sees the artifact as an intriguing case of a modern object creating its own false context, a geological illusion. Yet, for those who see the London hammer as a genuine anomaly, these explanations feel insufficient. They point to the seamless integration of the hammer within the stone, arguing that for a concretion to form so perfectly around a loose object is a highly specific and unlikely event. The unusual purity of the iron also raises questions, as it does not correspond neatly with known 19th-century blacksmithing practices in the region. The artifact sits at the heart of a classic impasse, a conflict between material evidence and established timelines. It forces a difficult choice. Do we reinterpret the object to fit the timeline, or do we reconsider the timeline to accommodate the object? The London hammer does more than challenge the history of technology. It probes the boundaries of our own origins. If it is authentic to its stony prison, it implies the presence of a tool-making intelligence in a world ruled by reptiles, a thought that stretches the imagination to its limit. It serves as a physical reminder of how fragile our reconstruction of the deep past truly is, built layer by layer from fossils and stone, where a single, stubborn artifact can become a wedge driven into the cracks of our certainty, asking us who or what might have been here before us. The transition from a hammer in stone to tales from the stars marks a shift from physical puzzles to narrative legends. Among the most enduring and controversial stories in this realm is that of the Dropa stones. According to accounts that first surfaced in the mid-20th century, a Chinese archaeologist named Kai Pu-te discovered a series of neat, circular burial sites in a remote mountain cave in 1938. Within these sites, he found the skeletal remains of individuals who were unusually small in stature, and alongside them, hundreds of mysterious stone discs, each with a hole in its center and a fine, double-grooved spiral inscription running from that hole to the outer edge. The discs were said to be profoundly ancient, around 12,000 years old, and made of a granite so hard that carving such intricate, tiny lines would have been a monumental technical challenge for any prehistoric culture. The discovery itself was strange, but the alleged translation of those spirals propelled the story into the extraordinary. A researcher named Tsum Nui supposedly spent years deciphering the grooves, concluding they were a form of writing. The story they told was not of hunting or rituals, but of a catastrophic arrival from the sky. The inscriptions reportedly described a group of beings, the Dropa, whose spacecraft crashed in the inaccessible mountains. Unable to repair their vessel, they were stranded on Earth and encountered hostility from the local tribes inhabiting the caves. The narrative spoke of their hardship and attempts to find peace, a record of loss and isolation etched in stone. This translation, if true, would be the most direct evidence imaginable for an ancient extraterrestrial presence, an artifact not just out of time but out of this world. The legend grew to include claims that in 1962, Russian scientists examined the discs and found they exhibited unusual vibrational properties and high concentrations of cobalt and other metals, as if they were some form of ancient electrical component or recording device. The complete package, the anomalous skeletons, the impossibly old discs, the star-faring narrative, created a perfect storm for alternative history. It wove together archaeology, paleontology, and ancient astronaut theory into a single, sensational tale. Yet, when subjected to rigorous scrutiny, the entire edifice of the Dropa story begins to crumble. No credible archaeological journal ever published Kai Pu-te's findings. The named translator, Tsum Nui, does not appear in any official records of Chinese philologists or archaeologists. The Russian scientific study has never been produced, and no museum in the world claims to hold any of the hundreds of alleged discs. The few photographs that circulate are grainy and show objects that closely resemble common or pierced stone discs, well-known artifacts from Neolithic China used for ceremonial purposes. Mainstream scholars universally regard the Dropa stones as a modern myth, likely originating from a sensationalized magazine article that then took on a life of its own through repetition and embellishment in books and documentaries. So why does this story, devoid of verifiable evidence, remain such a staple? Its persistence is a powerful lesson in the psychology of mystery. The Dropa narrative is compelling not because of its facts, but because of its structure. It takes the classic form of a discovery, a struggle for understanding, and a revelation that connects humanity to a grander cosmic drama. It represents the ultimate out-of-place artifact story, one that answers the who behind unexplained technology by pointing to the stars. It fulfills a deep-seated curiosity about our origins and the possibility that we are not alone, that our history is interwoven with visitors from other worlds. In this way, the legend of the Dropa stones is itself a cultural artifact. It shows how the human desire for connection and meaning can transform an unverified report into a modern folklore, a cautionary tale about the line between interpretation and invention, and a reminder that the most captivating mysteries are sometimes those woven entirely from the threads of our own imagination. A collection of stones can carry images that challenge the very foundations of natural history. In the arid Ica region of Peru, a local farmer named Basilio Ushuaia presented the world with one of its most visually startling archaeological controversies. He sold and gifted thousands of carved andesite stones to a visiting physician, Dr. Javier Cabrera, who became their passionate curator and interpreter. The stones themselves, weathered and heavy, are covered in intricate line drawings depicting scenes that feel ripped from both a prehistoric past and a science fiction future. Some show humans in apparent conflict with, or even riding upon, creatures that look unmistakably like dinosaurs, including Triceratops, Stegosaurs, and pterodactyls. Others illustrate what appear to be advanced medical operations, with figures performing detailed procedures on a human heart, and still others map out constellations or depict telescopes and flight. The implications were, and are, earth-shattering. If authentic, the Ica stones would suggest that an ancient Peruvian civilization possessed a detailed knowledge of creatures that had been extinct for 65 million years, alongside a grasp of medical and astronomical concepts far ahead of their time. Dr. Cabrera built an entire museum around them, weaving a narrative of a lost, highly advanced culture that had recorded its history and wisdom on these enduring canvases of stone. The mystery, however, took a dramatic turn when the discoverer himself, Basilio Ushuaia, admitted in a television interview that he had forged the vast majority of the stones. He demonstrated how he could create the carvings using a simple dental drill, and then age them with shoe polish and chicken droppings to give them an ancient patina. This confession seemed to slam the door shut on the mystery, branding the entire collection as an elaborate and profitable hoax, but the story did not end there. Ushuaia, in the same breath, made a crucial and often overlooked qualification. He claimed that while he had indeed manufactured many stones to meet the high demand from collectors and tourists, he had first discovered a genuine cache of ancient carved stones in a cave. He stated that these original, authentic artifacts were what inspired him to begin creating his own copies. This statement reopens a tiny, stubborn window of possibility. It places the Ica stones in a uniquely frustrating category of artifact, one where proven forgery and potential authenticity are hopelessly intertwined. The controversy now hinges on a single, almost philosophical question. Can any genuine stones be identified within a collection known to be flooded with modern fakes? Proponents of their authenticity point to several challenging details. The andesite stone itself is extremely hard, making detailed carving a difficult task even with modern tools, yet the lines on some specimens are remarkably fine and confident. Some stones were reportedly found in ancient burial mounds, a context that would be difficult for a modern forger to fabricate. Furthermore, the sheer volume and consistency of the iconography across thousands of stones suggest a coherent symbolic system, not just random doodles. Could a simple farmer have invented and consistently reproduced such a complex, if bizarre, visual language entirely on his own? Skeptics, including nearly all professional archaeologists, counter with overwhelming evidence. The stylistic elements of the dinosaurs, for instance, are clearly based on 20th century paleo art, mirroring the popular reconstructions found in children's books and museums of the 1960s and 70s, not on fossil skeletons as an ancient artist would have seen them. The medical scenes show a modern, anatomical understanding of the heart. No other archaeological find in the Americas, from pottery to textiles to monumental art, depicts anything remotely resembling these images. The entire phenomenon exists in a vacuum, supported only by the stones themselves and the stories of those who profit from them. The legacy of the Ica stones is therefore a lesson in the anatomy of a modern myth. They sit at the intersection of genuine curiosity, proven deception, and the enduring human desire to find evidence that our textbooks are wrong. They challenge us not with a clear archaeological anomaly, but with a murky cloud of doubt. Even if 99.9% of the stones are fakes, the whispered claim of an original cache forces us to wonder, what if the first stones Ushuaia found were real? What if a forgotten culture did look upon the giant bones weathering out of the hills and imagine the living creatures they once were, recording those visions in stone? The Ica stones ultimately may not rewrite history, but they powerfully write the story of how history can be imagined, manipulated, and yearned for, leaving us to sift through a mountain of doubt for a single, elusive grain of truth. A map can be a window into a world we thought was unknown. In the year 1513, Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis compiled a detailed world map, a stunning artifact of navigation and artistry drawn on gazelle skin. For centuries, it was admired as a remarkable achievement of its era, showing the coastlines of Europe, Africa, and the newly encountered lands of the Americas. But in the 20th century, a startling detail came to light, one that seemed to defy the very timeline of exploration. On the southern edge of the map, below the Atlantic Ocean, lies a landmass with a distinctly familiar shape. To modern eyes, it bears an uncanny resemblance to the coastline of Antarctica, a continent that would remain hidden beneath miles of ice and officially undiscovered by Western explorers for another 300 years. The mystery deepens with the map's own annotations. Piri Reis wrote that he had consulted and synthesized many source maps, some of which he claimed were incredibly ancient, dating back to the time of Alexander the Great in the 4th century before the Common Era. He stated that he used 20 different charts and mappae mundi, some of which are now completely lost to history. This admission is crucial because it suggests the admiral was not inventing geography from whole cloth, but acting as a compiler of knowledge, some of which was already millennia old. The most provocative claim is that the map does not just show a speculative southern continent, a common cartographic convention of the time, but that it appears to depict the actual subglacial topography of Antarctica. Some researchers argue that the coastline shown matches seismic surveys of the land beneath the ice cap with a degree of accuracy that seems impossible for a 16th century mapmaker. They propose a breathtaking interpretation that the Piri Reis map preserves fragments of ancient cartography from a time, perhaps thousands of years ago, when the Antarctic coast was ice-free and navigable. This would imply the existence of a seafaring civilization with global reach in a prehistoric warm period, a civilization whose maps were copied and recopied until only echoes remained in a Turkish admiral's workshop. Mainstream scholarship offers a different, more grounded analysis. Many cartographers and historians point out that the map contains significant errors, like the inaccurate placement of South America and the complete absence of the Pacific Ocean. They suggest the southern landmass is likely a composite of speculative geography, sailor tales of southern lands, and perhaps a distorted version of the southern tip of South America, all fitted together to fill the blank spaces on the parchment. The apparent accuracy of the Antarctic coast, they argue, is coincidental, a result of the map's stylized, almost abstract drawing style that can be made to fit many shapes if one looks hard enough. The debate ultimately hinges on a question of transmission. Could slivers of incredibly ancient geographical knowledge have survived through copies of copies, passing from Alexandrian libraries to Byzantine monasteries, to Arab scholars, and finally to an Ottoman admiral? Or is the Piri Reis map a brilliant but flawed product of its own time, a patchwork of the best available information in 1513, mixed with the inevitable myths and guesses that filled the edges of every period map? Either answer is profound. If it represents lost ancient knowledge, it rewrites the history of human exploration. If it is a product of Renaissance compilation, It stands as a testament to the incredible, if sometimes mistaken, reach of the pre-modern intellectual world. The map does not give us a clear answer, but it opens a tantalizing door. It hints that our planet's last great continent may have been first found not in the age of steam and steel, but in a forgotten epoch when different ships sailed under different stars, leaving only a ghostly trace on a piece of dried skin for a future admiral to inscrutably copy. The quietest artifact can sometimes shout the loudest questions. In a vault at Yale University rests a book that has defied understanding for centuries, a manuscript that is literally written in a language no one on Earth can read. Known as the Voynich Manuscript, this small, unassuming codex from the 15th century is arguably the most famous unsolved puzzle in the world of historical documents. Its 240 vellum pages are densely covered from edge to edge in a flowing, elegant script composed of strange, unfamiliar characters, arranged in a pattern that suggests a real language with its own rules of grammar and syntax. Yet, not a single word of it has ever been convincingly translated. This is not a matter of a lost dialect, it is a complete linguistic black hole. The text is accompanied by page after page of equally bewildering illustrations, divided into distinct sections that only deepen the mystery. There are lavish, full-page paintings of plants and herbs of astonishing detail, but they are botanically impossible, hybrids of known species with impossible root structures and fantastical leaves. Another section contains intricate circular diagrams that resemble astronomical or astrological charts, with zodiac symbols nestled inside complex arrangements of stars and nude female figures bathing in interconnected tubes and pools. Further pages show what appear to be biological or cellular diagrams and countless small, repetitive drawings of unidentified objects. From the moment it resurfaced in the early 20th century, the manuscript has been a siren call for the world's top codebreakers. Military cryptographers who cracked enemy ciphers in wartime, famed linguists, and historians of medieval science have all taken up the challenge, and all have ultimately been defeated. In recent years, even advanced artificial intelligence has been trained on its patterns, searching for a statistical key to the language. Some algorithms have suggested links to Hebrew or a constructed philosophical language, but no translation has produced a coherent, meaningful text that experts can agree upon. This relentless failure is what makes the Voynich manuscript such a profound out-of-place artifact. It is not out of place in time. We can carbon date the vellum to the early 1400s, but it is out of place in the stream of human knowledge. Every other manuscript from that era, no matter how obscure, fits into a known cultural, scientific, or religious context. We can identify herbals, astronomy texts, or works of alchemy. The Voynich fits nowhere, so what are we left to conclude? The possibilities are as fascinating as they are frustrating. One prevailing theory is that it is an elaborate and very costly hoax, created perhaps to deceive a wealthy patron. A clever forger could have invented a plausible-looking but meaningless script and filled pages with bizarre imagery to mimic a serious scientific work. The time and expense of the vellum and pigments, however, make this a hoax of monumental effort for uncertain gain. Another possibility is that it is written in a constructed language, a personal cipher, or an invented script for recording secret knowledge, perhaps related to alchemy or early medicine, meant to be understood only by a select few initiates. The most tantalizing idea is that it represents a genuine body of knowledge from a lost tradition, a snapshot of a herbal or cosmological system that existed outside the mainstream European canon and was then completely erased by history. The manuscript's very existence is a haunting reminder of the fragility of knowledge. It sits there, physically intact, its information perfectly preserved, yet utterly inaccessible. It is a locked door in the middle of the library of history, and we have spent a century trying every key we can imagine on its stubborn latch. Whether it is a masterpiece of deception, a private diary of madness, or the sole surviving textbook of a forgotten school of thought, the Voynich manuscript stands as the ultimate intellectual anomaly. It proves that an artifact can be perfectly preserved and completely lost at the same time, a silent lecture in a classroom where no one speaks the teacher's language. A single coin can hold the weight of an entire continent's hidden history. On the coast of Maine, at a well-documented Native American settlement site known as Goddard, archaeologists made a discovery that seemed to belong to another world entirely. During a systematic dig in the 1950s, a team sifting through layers of shells and artifacts uncovered a small silver disc, worn smooth by time. When cleaned and examined, it was unmistakably a Norse penny, a currency minted in Norway between 1065 and 1080 of the Common Era. This was not a modern replica or a misplaced collector's item. It was a genuine artifact from the Viking Age, lying amidst the remnants of a community that thrived long before Columbus set sail. Known as the Maine penny, it remains to this day the only pre-Columbian Norse object ever found in the United States outside of the confirmed settlement at Elance Orks Meadows in Newfoundland. Its lonely presence on that New England beach is a whisper of a story that official history has only recently begun to tell. The immediate question is as obvious as it is profound. How did an 11th century Norwegian coin travel over 1,000 miles to end up in a Penobscot Bay shell midden? The simplest explanation, and the one favored by many mainstream archaeologists, is one of long-distance trade. Indigenous trade networks across North America were vast and sophisticated, moving goods like copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf of Mexico, and obsidian from the Rocky Mountains across astonishing distances over generations. It is entirely plausible that a Norse object, perhaps left behind at a brief campsite in Newfoundland or Labrador, was picked up by local peoples. Over the course of decades or even centuries, it could have been traded hand to hand, moving ever southward as a curiosity, a piece of exotic material valued not as currency but as a rare and interesting item. By this logic, the coin is not direct evidence of Vikings in Maine, but rather a testament to the incredible reach and connectivity of Native American exchange systems, which eventually brought a piece of the Old World deep into the New, long before sustained European contact. Yet, the romantic and historically tantalizing possibility refuses to fade. Norse sagas, like the Saga of the Greenlanders, speak of expeditions sailing south from their Vinland base into warmer, richer lands they called Markland and Hop. These accounts describe encounters with indigenous peoples, sometimes peaceful trading, sometimes conflict. The Maine penny, resting where it was found, could be a tangible clue that these voyages of exploration ventured farther than we have physical proof for. Perhaps a Norse sailed down the Atlantic coast, and a single coin was lost during a trade or left at a campsite. Its discovery hints that the Norse footprint in North America, while small and transient, may have been broader than a single settlement, a series of faint coastal impressions washed away by time. The coin complicates the traditional narrative in a quiet but powerful way. It does not overturn the story of Christopher Columbus's voyage in 1492, which undeniably opened the floodgates of sustained transatlantic contact that reshaped the globe. Instead, it adds a poignant, earlier chapter. It suggests that the first threads of connection between the hemispheres were not a single bold stroke, but a series of fragile, fleeting touches. The Maine penny symbolizes a might have been, a road not taken on a continental scale. The Norse came, they saw, they ultimately left, and their brief presence faded into legend and a handful of archaeological clues. This small silver disc, then, is more than an out-of-place artifact. It is a symbol of historical contingency. It asks us to consider how different the story might have been if those early contacts had led to permanent settlement. It also honors the indigenous peoples who were, as the evidence suggests, active participants in this first, tentative chapter of transatlantic history, engaging with these strange newcomers and possibly carrying a token of that encounter for generations. The Maine penny is a humble, powerful reminder that history is not a single timeline of discovery, but a woven tapestry of meetings and missed chances, where even the smallest lost object can point to a much larger, forgotten map. Buried alongside the bones of giants, a small metal wedge holds a secret that defies the history of industry. In 1974, construction workers digging a trench near the Mureș River in Aiud, Romania, unearthed something unexpected 35 feet down in a layer of ancient sand. Alongside the massive, fossilized remains of a mastodon, an elephant-like creature that vanished at the end of the last ice age, they found a heavy, wedge-shaped metal object. It was covered in a thick, blackened layer of oxide, a crust that spoke of immense age. Initially thought to be a stone axe head, it was cleaned and analyzed, revealing a composition that sent shockwaves through the small circle of researchers who examined it. The Aiud wedge, as it became known, was made almost entirely of aluminum, an alloy mixed with several other metals. This fact alone is the core of the enigma. Aluminum is the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust, but it is never found in a pure, metallic state in nature. It is always locked tightly inside minerals, requiring a tremendous input of electrical energy to separate and refine, a process industrialized only in the late 19th century. The Hall-Héroult process, developed in 1886, is considered the birth of the modern aluminum industry. Yet here was an object found in a geological stratum alongside extinct megafauna, composed of this distinctly modern material. The oxide layer encasing it was measured to be over a millimeter thick, a depth that metallurgists suggest would require a significant passage of time, perhaps tens of thousands of years, to form under natural conditions. This creates a seemingly impossible chronological sandwich, a high-tech metal resting beside prehistoric bones. The immediate and most common-sense explanation from mainstream science is one of contamination. The object they propose is a piece of 20th-century machinery, most likely the tooth from a modern excavator or a mining drill bit that broke off and became buried during earlier, unrecorded work at the site. The sand could have settled over it quickly, and the mastodon bones, while ancient, could have been displaced from a different layer, creating a false association. This is a perfectly logical scenario, a classic case of an out-of-time context rather than an out-of-time artifact. It follows the principle of Occam's razor, choosing the simpler explanation that does not require us to rewrite the entire history of metallurgy. However, proponents of the wedge's anomalous nature point to stubborn details in the official reports. The depth of 35 feet is considerable, and the mastodon bones were described as being in the same stratum, not scattered or redeposited. The specific alloy composition of the wedge, while aluminum-based, is not a perfect match for common modern excavator teeth, which are typically made from much harder steel. Furthermore, the shape of the object with its two symmetrical holes seems oddly designed for a simple digging tool. Could it be part of something else entirely? The mystery of the Aiud wedge lingers not because it definitively proves ancient aluminum smelting, but because it resides in a frustrating gray area of evidence. It is an artifact that has not been conclusively debunked, nor has it been validated beyond doubt. It represents a conflict between a straightforward, modern explanation and a set of physical circumstances that resist being easily dismissed. It asks us to consider the integrity of the site itself and the reliability of the original discovery account. Was this a careful archaeological excavation with documented layers, or a construction dig where context could have been muddled? The wedge sits in a private museum today, a silent, heavy question mark. It challenges us with a possibility, however remote, that the story of human technological mastery may have obscure, forgotten prologues. Perhaps it is merely a lost piece of a 1950s bulldozer, but the image persists of a refined metal alloy lying in the dark beside the remains of a creature from a lost world, a juxtaposition that continues to fuel the imagination and remind us that the ground beneath our feet may hold layers of history far more puzzling than we assume. A stone found in the roots of a Minnesota poplar tree tells a story that refuses to be silenced. In 1898, a Swedish immigrant farmer named Olof Oman was clearing land on his property near Kensington when he unearthed a large, flat slab of greywacke stone tangled in the root system of an aspen tree. On its face was a dense inscription carved in runic characters, the ancient alphabet of the Norse. When translated, the message was astonishing. It purported to be a record left by a group of 30 Goths and Norwegians on an exploration journey from Vinland far to the west. Dated to the year 1362, the inscription described a tragic event, stating that 10 of their party had been killed with the ominous line, "A VM save us from evil." It was a plea for protection carved in stone, seemingly placing Norse explorers hundreds of miles inland in North America, over a century before Columbus sailed. The immediate academic response was swift and dismissive. Linguists pored over the runes and declared them a clumsy forgery. They pointed out anachronisms, suggesting the runic forms and the language used mixed styles from different centuries and regions in a way no genuine 14th century carver would have done. The very phrase, a VM, was interpreted as an abbreviation for Ave Virgo Maria, or Hail Virgin Mary, a Catholic invocation seen as out of place for medieval Norse explorers who would have been Lutheran. The consensus quickly solidified. The Kensington runestone was a hoax, likely crafted by Olof Oman himself or a knowledgeable neighbor, a piece of nostalgic folklore created by homesick Scandinavian immigrants longing to plant a deep historical root in their new American soil. For decades, the stone was relegated to the status of a curious local legend, a textbook example of a proven fake, but a mystery once buried has a way of pushing back toward the light. In the latter half of the 20th century, a new wave of researchers began to challenge the dismissal. They focused not solely on the linguistics, which remained hotly debated, but on the physical evidence of the stone itself. Geologists examined the weathering of the inscription, noting that the carved lines showed signs of extensive, long-term mineral degradation consistent with centuries of exposure, not a few years of aging attempted with modern tools. The specific pattern of lichen growth on the stone's surface was also cited as evidence of great age. Perhaps most compellingly, they revisited the context of its discovery. The tree that had grown over the stone was an aspen, and by counting its rings, they estimated its age at around 40 years. For the stone to have been firmly embedded within the root system, it would have had to have been in place long before the tree began to grow, pushing its burial date back well before Oman's family arrived in Minnesota. This geological and botanical evidence created a stubborn counter-argument to the hoax theory. If the stone was a modern creation, how did it become so deeply integrated into the landscape, showing weathering that experts argued would take hundreds of years to form? The debate thus reaches a fascinating impasse, a clash between the humanities and the hard sciences. Linguists see a text that looks wrong for its time, while some geologists see a stone that looks right for its age. This leaves us with a profound either-or scenario. Either a group of Scandinavian settlers in the 1890s possessed not only deep runic knowledge, but also the sophisticated ability to artificially age stone and manipulate its burial in a way that would fool future geological analysis, or the inscription is genuine. If it is authentic, the implications are monumental. It would mean that nearly 130 years after the last known Norse voyages to Vinland, a late medieval expedition, perhaps launched from the struggling Greenland settlements, ventured deep into the heart of the continent. They would have traveled from Hudson Bay down the river systems into what is now Minnesota, an incredible journey of endurance and exploration. The runestone would stand as a lonely monument to their presence, and to their tragic end, a ghost from a forgotten chapter of contact. The Kensington runestone, therefore, is more than an artifact. It is a litmus test for how we weigh evidence. Do we trust the analysis of language, which can be subjective and evolve with new discoveries, or do we trust the silent testimony of minerals and tree roots? It embodies the tension between what we believe should be possible according to our records and what the physical world might be trying to tell us. It remains a deeply polarizing relic, a slab of stone that continues to divide experts and captivate anyone who wonders what other stories might be hidden just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to be unearthed. From a single stone inscription, we now move to an entire landscape transformed into a question. Stretching across the arid plains of southern Peru, the Nazca lines are not an artifact you can hold, but an experience you must soar above to comprehend. Created by the Nazca culture between 500 years before the Common Era and 500 years after, these geoglyphs are colossal drawings etched into the desert floor by removing the dark, iron oxide-coated surface stones to reveal the lighter-colored earth beneath. From ground level, they appear as shallow, meandering trails, but ascend to the sky, and the true masterpiece reveals itself. The plateau becomes a canvas for hundreds of precise geometric shapes, straight lines that run for miles, and enormous, stunningly detailed depictions of animals: a hummingbird with a long, delicate beak, a spider, a monkey with a spiraled tail, and a condor with wings outstretched. These figures can be over 1,200 feet long, their proportions perfect only when viewed from a vantage point the Nazca people themselves seemingly could never have achieved. This fundamental contradiction is the heart of the mystery. How, and more importantly why, would a civilization invest centuries of labor to create magnificent art they could never see? The conventional explanations offered by archaeologists are rooted in the spiritual and practical world of the Nazca. One leading theory posits that the lines were sacred pathways, walked during rituals to petition the gods, perhaps for water in this incredibly dry region. The act of walking the lines itself may have been the point, a form of devotional movement where the final image was meant for divine eyes, not human ones. Another compelling idea links the glyphs to astronomy, suggesting key lines point to celestial events like solstice sunrises or the rising of important stars, functioning as a giant calendar tied to agricultural cycles and religious ceremonies. These explanations paint a picture of a deeply religious society using their environment in a profound, communal act of faith and observation. Yet, the sheer scale and precision of the lines invite more speculative questions. Constructing a perfectly straight line over 5 miles long across uneven terrain, or ensuring the proportions of a giant spider are accurate, would require sophisticated surveying techniques even by modern standards. Researchers have demonstrated that with simple tools like wooden stakes and ropes, the Nazca could have achieved this through careful planning and scaling up smaller models. They possessed the engineering skill, but the logistical coordination remains awe-inspiring. This technical prowess, combined with the aerial perspective required to appreciate the work, has fueled alternative theories for decades. Some propose the Nazca had access to primitive hot air balloons or kites to gain a bird's-eye view during construction, though no evidence of such technology has been found. The most famous and controversial idea suggests the lines were meant as signals or runways for aerial observers from other worlds, a theory that captures the imagination but is dismissed by scholars as ignoring the rich cultural and archaeological context of the Nazca themselves. The true power of the Nazca lines lies in their ability to hold multiple truths at once. they are undoubtedly a testament to a remarkable indigenous civilization's dedication, spiritual belief, and understanding of their environment. Simultaneously, they stand as a permanent challenge to our assumptions about ancient capabilities and perspective. They force us to reconcile human-scale effort with a monumental vision. Perhaps the most profound insight is that the Nazca did not need to see the whole picture to believe in its power and meaning. Their faith in their gods, their knowledge of the stars, and their connection to the land were compass enough. The lines remind us that mystery is not always a gap in knowledge, but sometimes a different way of knowing, where the journey of creation holds as much significance as the final view from the clouds. They remain a breathtaking monument to human ambition, etched not in stone but into the very skin of the earth, waiting patiently for the modern eye to discover and wonder. Deep in the humid jungles of Costa Rica, a different kind of mystery lies half buried in the earth. Not lines on a desert, but perfect forms emerging from the soil. The stone spheres of the Diquis Delta are monuments of geometry, hundreds of them, ranging from the size of a melon to colossal orbs over 8 feet in diameter and weighing more than 16 tons. Discovered in the 1930s when the United Fruit Company was clearing land for banana plantations, these spheres stopped bulldozers in their tracks. They were not naturally occurring boulders, but artifacts of stunning precision, carved from a hard stone called granodiorite. The immediate question was as simple as it was baffling. How did a pre-Columbian culture without metal tools or the wheel achieve such flawless spherical shapes, and perhaps more importantly, why would they devote such immense effort to do so? The creation of these spheres is a puzzle of lost engineering. The Diquis culture, which flourished from around 600 years of the Common Era until the Spanish arrival, left no written records explaining their methods. Researchers believe the process began by selecting a large boulder, then using heat from controlled fires to make the surface brittle before chiseling it away with tools made of stone of equal or greater hardness. Through a meticulous process of pecking, grinding, and polishing with sand and water over what must have been generations for the largest spheres, they achieved a symmetry that is mathematically precise. Modern measurements show many of the spheres have a near-perfect curvature, with variations of less than a centimeter across their entire surface. This indicates not just patient craftsmanship, but a sophisticated, possibly formalized understanding of geometry and three-dimensional form. The skill required to maintain that symmetry while removing tons of stone is a testament to a specialized, highly skilled artisan tradition that has completely vanished. Their purpose, however, is the greater enigma. When first encountered by archaeologists, many of the spheres were found arranged in groups, often in lines, triangles, or parabolic curves, leading to important structures like plazas or the bases of chiefs' houses. This deliberate placement suggests they held profound social or ceremonial meaning. Some researchers theorize the arrangements mirrored constellations or were aligned to solar events, turning landscapes into cosmic maps that connected the community to the heavens. Others see them as symbols of power and status, where the size and perfection of a sphere directly reflected the authority of a chief or a family lineage. They may have served as territorial markers or as sacred objects representing celestial bodies like the sun or the moon in spiritual practice. The tragedy is that most of these original arrangements were destroyed when the spheres were rolled away by farm equipment or relocated to government buildings and private gardens as curiosities, severing them from the contextual clues that might have unlocked their meaning. Today, the spheres stand as silent ambassadors of a lost world. They are not merely big stones, they are expressions of an idea, a cultural obsession with perfection, balance, and cosmic order made tangible. They force us to recognize that technological sophistication in the ancient Americas took many forms, not just pyramids and temples, but also in this quiet, relentless pursuit of geometric ideal. In their perfect curves, we see a community investing generations of labor not for shelter or immediate survival, but for something intangible, a connection to the universe, a demonstration of social unity, or a dialogue with the divine. Their silent, spherical presence in the jungle is a powerful reminder that some of humanity's most enduring mysteries are not about what was built, but about the beautiful, inexplicable why that drove the builders to shape the very earth into forms of such impossible perfection. The walls of an ancient Egyptian temple hold an image that seems to flicker with modern light. Within the crypts of the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, a series of intricate stone reliefs carved over 2,000 years ago depict a scene that has sparked one of the most visually compelling debates in alternative history. The carving shows a large, elongated object reminiscent of a glass bulb or vase. Inside this bulb rests a snake, its body stretched out in a straight line, with its head touching one end of a curved wire that leads to a small box held by a kneeling figure. Another figure stands supporting the entire bulb-like object with both hands, while a pillar-like form, which some interpret as an insulator, rises from the base. To a modern eye, the composition is startlingly familiar. It looks uncannily like a giant, archaic light bulb, complete with a filament, power cables, and a supporting stand. The interpretation is electrifying. Could this be evidence that the ancient Egyptians possessed, or at least conceptualized, some form of electrical illumination? This idea suggests that the famed, shadowless light seen in tombs and temples, often attributed to cleverly placed mirrors, might have had a far more advanced source, a technology lost to time. The implications would be profound, rewriting our understanding of their technical prowess. Egyptologists, however, offer a profoundly different and deeply symbolic reading. They explain that the scene is a classic representation of a foundational Egyptian creation myth. In this interpretation, the bulb is not a bulb at all, but a protective sphere or a lotus flower, a symbol of creation and rebirth. The snake inside is not a filament but the serpent god Hemsut, representing the primordial life force. The curved wire is a lotus stem, and the small box is a jed pillar, a symbol of stability. The entire tableau illustrates the moment of creation where the sun god, born from the lotus, emerges to bring light to the world. This is not a technical diagram, but a sacred narrative carved in stone, its meaning rooted in cosmology, not circuitry. This stark clash of interpretations makes the Dendera reliefs a perfect case study in how we see the past. One perspective looks at the carving and sees a literal object, a piece of forgotten technology whose form we recognize from our own world. The other looks at the same lines and sees a complex metaphor, a spiritual truth expressed through a rich, symbolic language. The debate illuminates less about ancient Egypt and more about ourselves, revealing how our modern minds, steeped in a world of electricity and machinery, can instinctively project those frameworks onto ancient art. We are pattern-seeking creatures, and when we encounter the unknown, we often try to fit it into the shapes we know best. This is not necessarily wrong. It is how discovery often begins, with a moment of recognition. But the disciplined study of history requires us to step back and ask whether that recognition is a true insight or a cultural mirage. Are we finding a light bulb because it is there, or because we cannot conceive of light being represented in any other way? The reliefs do not exist in a vacuum. They are part of a vast tapestry of temple art filled with similar symbolic creatures and plants, all conveying theological ideas. No accompanying text describes an electrical device. No physical remnants of glass bulbs or generators have been found in any Egyptian archaeological context. The mainstream explanation fits seamlessly into everything else we know about Egyptian religion and art. Yet, the allure of the alternative interpretation persists, fueled by that powerful, immediate visual echo. It speaks to a desire to find lost wisdom, to believe that ancient civilizations might have grasped concepts we consider modern. The Dendera reliefs ultimately serve as a powerful reminder that the past is a foreign country, and its inhabitants often thought in languages of symbol and myth that can be difficult for our empirically minded world to translate. Whether one sees a forgotten generator or a sacred lotus, these ancient carvings continue to cast a long, provocative shadow, challenging us to question not only what we are looking at, but how we choose to see it. A single, small face stares back from across an ocean of time. In 1933, archaeologists excavating a burial mound at the site of Calixtlahuaca, near Mexico City, made a discovery that seemed to belong to a different continent entirely. Within a sealed layer dated firmly to the late 15th century, they uncovered a terracotta head. It was a simple artifact, but its features were unmistakable and profoundly out of place. This was not a representation of a Mesoamerican deity or a local ruler. The figure had a full, stylized beard and wore a distinct peaked cap known as a pileus, a style characteristic of Roman art from the classical period. The craftsmanship, with its realistic modeling and sharp lines, stood in stark contrast to the artistic traditions of the indigenous cultures in the region. The artifact, now known as the Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca head, presented an immediate and profound puzzle. How could a figurine with clear Roman artistic influence end up buried in a sealed, pre-Columbian context in central Mexico decades before any documented European contact? The implications are staggering, suggesting a whisper of connection between two worlds that history insists were still separate. The most logical explanation, and the one most archaeologists cautiously favor, is one of contamination. They propose the head is a genuine Roman artifact, perhaps brought to Mexico by a Spanish colonist in the 16th century as a curiosity or personal belonging. Through some accident or later activity, it could have fallen into an older layer of the site, creating a false association. This is a common challenge in archaeology, where later objects can intrude into earlier contexts through animal burrows, root action, or even the digging of later graves. If this is the case, the head is a fascinating historical object, but not an anomalous one, simply a Roman artifact that found its way to the New World through conventional, post-Columbian channels. However, the defenders of the head's authenticity point to the specific conditions of its discovery. The head was found within a structure that had been deliberately sealed under a layer of adobe and volcanic rock, a context that appeared undisturbed since the original internment. The dating of the associated materials consistently points to a period between 1476 and 1510, a window that closes before Hernán Cortés landed on the Mexican coast in 1519. This sealed context is the crux of the mystery, making the idea of a simple intrusion more difficult to accept without a clear mechanism. If we entertain the possibility that the head is authentically where and when it was found, the historical narrative must stretch to accommodate it. This would not mean Roman legions marched through Mesoamerica, but it could hint at something far more subtle and intriguing: the possibility of sporadic, indirect transoceanic contact. Perhaps a Roman vessel blown off course in the Atlantic drifted across the ocean. Survivors might have reached the shores of the Americas, and this small terracotta head, a personal item or trade good, eventually made its way inland through indigenous trade networks over generations. Alternatively, the contact could have been mediated by other seafaring cultures. Could Norse explorers who we know reached North America have carried Roman artifacts traded from Europe and lost them during their own southward explorations? Or might there have been a forgotten voyage from West Africa where cultures interacted with the Roman world that reached the Gulf of Mexico? Each scenario is speculative, a thread of possibility spun from a single piece of fired clay. The head does not provide answers, only a provocative question mark. The true significance of the Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca head lies in its ability to hold two mutually exclusive histories in tension. It is either a compelling case for pre-Columbian transoceanic contact or a masterclass in how difficult it is to prove a negative in archaeology. It embodies the constant struggle between the clean timelines we construct in textbooks and the messy, complex reality of the past, where an object can slip through the cracks of our understanding. This small terracotta face, with its foreign features, continues to gaze silently from the depths of a Mexican burial mound, not demanding we believe its story, but insisting we never stop questioning the walls we build between worlds and epochs. It is a reminder that history is written not just by the victors, but sometimes by the quietest, most stubborn artifacts that refuse to fit neatly on the shelf. The line between a manufactured tool and a natural wonder can be surprisingly thin. In 1885, workers at a foundry in Wolfsegg, Austria, were breaking apart a block of coal dug from a tertiary-era seam when their hammers struck something unexpected. Embedded within the coal, a substance formed millions of years ago, was a heavy, metallic object. It was roughly cube-shaped with rounded edges and a distinct, shallow groove running around its midsection. This object, which would come to be known as the Wolfsegg iron or the Salzburg cube, immediately sparked intense debate. To the miners and the first scientists who examined it, the symmetrical shape and that deliberate-looking groove suggested it was not a random lump of metal, but something that had been worked, shaped by an intelligent hand. The context made this idea breathtaking, for if it was a forged artifact, it would have to be as old as the coal that encased it, placing a crafted iron object in a time frame of millions of years, long before humans are believed to have existed. The discovery story perfectly captures that initial, electrifying moment of anomaly, where an object seems to shout its impossibility from the depths of deep time. It appeared to be a classic out-of-place artifact, a human signature in a pre-human world, threatening to upend our entire understanding of human origins and technological development. The mystery, however, did not end with its discovery. The Wolfsegg iron became a subject of serious scientific scrutiny, and the conclusions drawn from that analysis provide a crucial lesson in the methodology of mystery. Researchers conducted detailed studies of the object's composition and structure. They found it was primarily iron, but with a significant amount of nickel and traces of other elements, a blend not typical of ancient human smelting. More tellingly, under microscopic examination, the internal structure showed a crystalline pattern known as a Widmanstetten pattern, a signature of nickel-iron alloys that cool very slowly over millions of years, a process that occurs naturally in certain meteorites or under specific geological conditions. The groove, once thought to be a mark of craftsmanship, was likely a seam where different mineral layers met and weathered at different rates. The prevailing scientific consensus is that the object is a natural iron concretion, a metallic nodule that formed through purely geological processes. It is a fascinating piece of our planet's mineral history, but not a relic of a lost civilization. This journey from shocking anomaly to explained wonder is profoundly important. The Wolfsegg iron endures not as proof of ancient astronauts or forgotten advanced cultures, but as a masterclass in how our perception can be tricked by the natural world. Our minds are wired to see patterns and intention, especially in symmetrical forms. A cube with a groove looks designed because in our human experience, such shapes are almost always the result of design. Nature, however, is a master sculptor in its own right, capable of producing forms of startling regularity through the slow, patient forces of chemistry, pressure, and erosion. The story of this iron cube reminds us that the first step in confronting any historical mystery is not to rewrite the timeline, but to question the artifact itself with rigorous, dispassionate analysis. It highlights the essential tension between the thrill of discovery and the discipline of explanation. For every object that truly challenges our past, there may be a dozen like the wolf's egg iron, natural mimics that test our discernment. This does not diminish the value of the search, it refines it. It teaches us to look closer, to ask harder questions, and to appreciate that sometimes the greatest wonder is not a message from a lost world, but the incredible, intricate artistry of the natural world itself, which can craft a puzzle so perfect it takes science decades to solve. High on a remote mountain in China, a collection of rusted iron forms emerge from the stone like the bones of a forgotten machine. The Bagong pipes, as they are known, are a series of tubular structures found embedded in the solid rock of Mount Bagong. They vary in diameter from mere inches to over 1.5 feet across, and they are startlingly symmetrical, running horizontally into the cliff face and even reportedly leading toward a nearby saltwater lake. Adding to the site's mystique is the presence of a large, weathered, pyramid-shaped natural formation that looms over the area. This combination of features, so alien to the barren landscape, feels instinctively manufactured. It is a scene that seems ripped from a tale of lost technology, where the wilderness has slowly consumed the infrastructure of an ancient, advanced civilization. The pipe's metallic composition and their precise placement provoke an immediate, powerful question. Who could have built this in such an inaccessible place, and for what unimaginable purpose? Local folklore, perhaps inspired by the site's otherworldly appearance, offers one dramatic answer, speaking of an extraterrestrial base, a place where visitors from the stars once operated, leaving behind these rusted conduits as the only evidence of their stay. This narrative captures the imagination, framing the pipes as literal plumbing for a starship or a facility, a haunting relic of contact. Yet, geology presents a different, equally fascinating story. When scientists examine formations like these, they often find an explanation not in lost workshops, but in the patient, creative forces of the planet itself. Geologists who have studied the site and similar phenomena propose that the Bagong pipes are likely the result of natural processes. One leading theory suggests they are fossilized tree root casts. Millions of years ago, this arid mountain might have been a lush forest. When ancient trees fell and their roots decayed, the hollow spaces left behind could have filled with iron-rich sediment and minerals carried by groundwater. Over eons, this infill hardened into solid, tube-shaped rock, while the surrounding material eroded away, leaving the more resistant ironstone pipes protruding from the cliff. Another possibility is that they are pipe concretions, mineral formations that occur when dissolved iron precipitates out of water around a central nucleus, growing outward in concentric layers, sometimes forming perfect, hollow cylinders through complex geochemical processes. Nature, it turns out, is a master pipe fitter, capable of creating stunningly regular forms through the slow chemistry of stone and water. The true significance of the Bagong pipes lies in this very tension. They perfectly embody the fine line our journey has continually explored, the line between an extraordinary natural phenomenon and a potential archaeological mystery. They challenge our pattern-seeking minds, which look at straight lines and symmetrical tubes and immediately see the work of hands. This instinct is not a flaw, it is the spark of curiosity that drives discovery. But the follow-through requires the disciplined light of scientific examination. The site underscores a critical lesson for any enigmatic find, the absolute necessity of on-site, rigorous study. Without detailed core samples, precise dating, and a full analysis of the surrounding strata, the pipes remain a captivating rumor, a story told by the landscape itself. Are they the incredible fossilized remains of a prehistoric forest, a mineralogical oddity that formed under rare and specific conditions, or could they, against all odds, be something else entirely? Their remote location has made definitive, repeated study difficult, leaving the question tantalizingly open. They stand not as proof of any single theory, but as a monument to the wonder of the unexplained, a reminder that our planet is still capable of producing puzzles that blur the boundary between the made and the born, urging us to look closer before we leap to conclusions. A single piece of ancient linen holds an image that has defied both faith and science. The Shroud of Turin is a length of herringbone weave cloth, just over 14 feet long, bearing the faint, straw-colored imprint of a man who appears to have suffered crucifixion. The anatomical details are chillingly precise, showing wounds consistent with Roman scourging, a puncture in the wrist, and markings on the forehead that could correspond to a crown of thorns. For millions of the faithful, this is not merely an artifact. It is the sacred burial cloth of Jesus Christ, a tangible connection to the central event of their religion. Its very presence is a powerful object of veneration, a relic that seems to bridge the chasm between historical narrative and spiritual belief. Yet, this profound spiritual significance exists in a state of permanent tension with the rigorous demands of empirical investigation. The shroud is not just a relic, it is one of the most intensely studied objects in the world, a battleground where faith and science have wrestled for decades. In 1988, a pivotal event seemed to deliver a definitive verdict. With permission from the Vatican, small samples from a corner of the shroud were sent to 3 independent laboratories for radiocarbon dating. The results were unanimous, placing the linen's origin between 1260 and 1390 of the Common Era, squarely within the medieval period. To the scientific community, this was a clear answer. The shroud was a creation of the Middle Ages, likely a devotional object crafted with immense skill for a believing populace. This finding should have settled the debate, but instead, it only deepened the mystery and fueled a new wave of questions from those convinced of its authenticity. Proponents of the shroud's ancient origins immediately challenged the carbon dating. They argued that the sample taken may have been from a medieval repair, a section of cloth rewoven into the original after a fire in the 1600s nearly destroyed it. They pointed to complex chemical reactions caused by that fire, suggesting the intense heat could have altered the carbon signature of the linen, making a first-century cloth appear centuries younger. This critique highlights a fundamental challenge in archaeology, the possibility of contamination, where a single event can rewrite an object's apparent age. The debate over the dating remains fiercely contested, a technical stalemate that leaves the timeline frustratingly unresolved. But the carbon dating controversy is only half the puzzle. The greater and perhaps more compelling mystery is the image itself. How was it made? For decades, teams of chemists, physicists, and forensic experts have subjected the shroud to every form of non-destructive analysis imaginable. They have found no traces of brushstrokes, no pigments, no dyes, and no medium of any kind that would account for the coloration. The image is not painted on the surface. It resides only in the topmost microfibers of the cloth, as if produced by a brief, intense burst of energy that caused a subtle caramelization of the cellulose threads. This effect is so superficial that it can be scraped away with a razor blade. No known medieval artistic technique, no matter how clever, can reproduce this specific chemical signature and 3-dimensional encoding of information. The shroud's image contains data. The varying intensity of the stain corresponds to the distance between the cloth and the body it supposedly covered, creating a kind of primitive photographic negative long before the invention of photography. This inexplicable method of image formation is the shroud's most stubborn scientific riddle. Whether one views it through the lens of devout belief or skeptical inquiry, the Shroud of Turin stands as a unique historical artifact. It is an object that refuses to be categorized. If it is a medieval creation, it represents an astronomical leap in technical and artistic genius that was then completely lost, a forgery of such sophistication that it continues to baffle 21st century science. If it is authentic to the 1st century, then it is an artifact of unimaginable significance, a physical echo of a moment that shaped human history. Its enduring power lies in this very duality, in its ability to hold two mutually exclusive truths in a single, fragile piece of cloth, silently challenging both our laboratories and our longing for connection across the ages. The final artifact is a circle of stone that seems to hold a secret of life itself. The genetic disc, a round black stone object said to be from Colombia, is etched with a series of intricate, miniature scenes that are immediately recognizable to anyone with a basic understanding of modern biology. In crisp, clean lines, the carvings illustrate what appears to be the human reproductive process, step by step. There are clear depictions of sperm cells, detailed ovum, and the moment of fertilization. Further along the disc's surface, one can see the progression of a developing fetus through various stages, from a small cluster of cells to a more recognizable human form. Other symbols resemble cell division and what look like detailed representations of different types of human cells. The precision is startling, a biological textbook rendered in lithic art. This is where the mystery ignites with impossible force. If this disc is authentic to a pre-Columbian culture, it presents a paradox that defies the very history of science. These images show knowledge that could only be gained by seeing life at a microscopic level, a feat humanity did not achieve until the invention of the compound microscope in the 17th century. The disc implies its creators possessed an understanding of human embryology that was not formally developed in the Western world until the 19th and 20th centuries. This is not merely an artifact out of time, it is an idea out of time, a complete system of intimate biological knowledge appearing where, according to our records, it simply could not exist. The weight of this claim, however, is balanced on a very fragile foundation of provenance. Unlike artifacts excavated by professional archaeologists, the genetic disc appeared on the antiquities market without a clear, documented chain of custody. Its exact find location, the archaeological layer it came from, and the associated artifacts are all unknown. This lack of context is a critical weakness, opening the door to the most likely explanation offered by skeptics, that it is a sophisticated modern creation. A skilled artist with access to high school biology textbooks could, with patience and talent, reproduce these images on an ancient-looking stone. The disc could be a clever forgery, designed to amaze and to sell, capitalizing on the fascination with out-of-place artifacts. This explanation is clean, logical, and requires no revision of history. Yet, for those who examine the object itself, questions linger. The stone is reported to be lyddite, a hard and brittle material that is notoriously difficult to carve with such fine, unbroken lines, especially for depicting such minuscule, complex forms. The style of the carvings does not neatly match any known pre-Columbian artistic tradition, which typically stylized nature rather than rendering it with such clinical, diagrammatic precision. This very strangeness is a double-edged sword. It could be proof of its alien origin to the Americas, or further evidence of its modern fabrication. The genetic disc, therefore, forces us to confront the ultimate limit of this entire exploration. It represents the farthest edge of the out-of-place artifact phenomenon, where an object does not just suggest lost technology or forgotten contact, but implies a wholesale leap in scientific understanding that has no precedent and no echo in the cultural record. It asks us to believe in a total historical blackout, where an entire school of advanced biological inquiry flourished and then vanished without leaving a single other trace in art, legend, or oral tradition. This stretches credulity to its breaking point for most historians, and yet the disc's silent, detailed testimony remains. Whether it is a profound hoax or a genuinely inexplicable relic, its power is undeniable. It serves as the perfect final piece for our collection because it encapsulates the core tension we have seen again and again. It is the conflict between the awe-inspiring object and the missing story, between what we see with our own eyes and what our established history tells us is possible. The genetic disk does not provide answers, but it perfectly frames the final, lingering question that all these artifacts leave us with, a question not about stone or metal, but about the vast, silent library of the human past and how many of its most astonishing volumes might have been lost before we ever learned to read. The cumulative weight of these mysteries suggests something far greater than a collection of oddities. Individually, each artifact presents a fascinating puzzle, a single note of dissonance in the symphony of history. But when we step back and listen to them together, a different, more haunting melody begins to emerge. Patterns connect across continents and millennia, not as proof of a single conspiracy, but as a chorus of questions about the very shape of our past. We see repeated whispers of sophisticated knowledge in precise fields. The Antikythera Mechanism and the celestial alignments of the Nazca lines speak to an advanced understanding of astronomy, not just as myth, but as a measurable mechanical science. The Baghdad battery and the peculiar composition of the Aiud wedge hint at experimentation with materials and energies we thought were modern domains. The Saqqara bird and the genetic disk, whether authentic or forged to provoke, represent conceptual leaps into aerodynamics and microbiology that feel jarringly out of sequence. These are not random anomalies, they cluster around specific ideas, suggesting that the light of discovery may have flickered in isolated workshops or schools of thought, only to be snuffed out by time, conflict, or simple forgetting. Another recurring theme is movement, the startling evidence of things and people in places they should not be. The Maine penny and the Kensington runestone suggest Norse footprints far beyond their known settlements. The Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca head and the Piri Reis map whisper of ocean crossings and map-making that defy our timelines of exploration. These artifacts point to a world that may have been more connected in antiquity than our textbooks allow, where ideas and objects traveled along fragile, forgotten trade routes that stretched across seas and deserts. This collective picture challenges the most comforting narrative of human progress, the image of a steady, upward climb from primitive tools to complex machines. Instead, these objects suggest a history that might look more like a mountain range, with towering peaks of achievement separated by deep valleys of loss. A civilization might master the stars or the secrets of metal, only to have that knowledge become a casualty of a changing climate, a social collapse, or simply the slow erosion of oral tradition. The Library of Alexandria burning was not a singular tragedy, but a symbol of a process that has happened countless times on smaller scales. An entire language of engineering can die with its last artisan, a map can crumble to dust, a technique can become a forbidden secret and then vanish entirely. This synthesis does not demand we believe in ancient astronauts or sunken continents, though it certainly fuels such speculation. It asks for a more nuanced humility. It invites us to view history as a dynamic, fragmented landscape, full of dead ends and abandoned paths. Our current timeline is not wrong, but it is likely incomplete, a story reconstructed from the fragments that survived the relentless filter of time. These 20 artifacts are the fragments that did not fit, the pieces from a different puzzle that somehow ended up in our box. They remind us that every era has its blind spots, and every generation assumes it stands at the pinnacle of understanding. The true lesson of these out-of-place artifacts may not be about rewriting the past, but about rethinking our relationship with knowledge itself. They ask us to consider what brilliant insights we possess today that might be lost tomorrow, and what echoes of forgotten genius might still lie buried, waiting to once again challenge the certainty of a future age. These objects are not asking us to blindly rewrite the textbook. They are, instead, persistent invitations to re-examine its footnotes and question its assumptions. History is not a static monument, but a living conversation, a story we continually reconstruct from the fragments that time has chosen to spare. Every artifact we accept, from a common pottery shard to a majestic pyramid, is a piece of evidence interpreted through the lens of what we think we know. The out-of-place artifact is the piece that does not fit the current picture, forcing a choice. Do we reshape the puzzle to make it fit, or do we consider that our vision of the final image might be incomplete? This tension is not a weakness of historical study, but its greatest strength. It is the engine of discovery. Healthy skepticism guards against credulity, demanding rigorous proof and clear context. It asks the hard questions about dating, provenance, and alternative explanations. Yet, an equally open-minded curiosity is what allows new paradigms to form. It is the willingness to say, this does not make sense with our current model, so let us look again, let us dig deeper, and let us be prepared to be surprised. The true value of these mysteries may lie less in any single definitive answer and more in the questions they keep alive. They are custodians of wonder, ensuring we never become so certain of our past that we stop exploring its shadows. They remind us that every era has considered itself the pinnacle of understanding, only to be humbled by the discoveries of the next. What might future generations unearth that will reshape the story we tell about ourselves today? Perhaps a forgotten library, a city beneath the waves, or a tool made of a material we cannot yet name. The journey through these 20 artifacts culminates in a single, humbling realization. The human story is unimaginably vast, complex, and resilient. We have likely uncovered only the first few chapters, with many pages still buried, waiting for the right moment, the right hand to turn them. If this exploration into the edges of history has sparked your curiosity, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the world's greatest enduring puzzles. And we would love to hear from you. Which of these artifacts challenges your view of the past most profoundly? Share your thoughts in the comments below.